If you've been coming to the circle for a while, you know I like to start off with a story. Telling stories is a good way for hearts to open, but this story wants to be read. This story wants to be read because these words are so precise. Written by the late Brian Doyle. Early one morning, several teachers and staffers at a Connecticut grade school were in a staff meeting. The meeting had been underway for about 5 minutes when they heard a chilling sound in the hallway. Pop, 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 said one of the staffers later. Most of them dove under the table. That's the reasonable thing to do, what they were trained to do, and that is what they did. But 2 of the staffers jumped or leapt or lunged out of their chairs and ran toward the sound of the bullets. Which word you use depends on which news account of that morning you read, but the words all point in the same direction, toward the bullets. One of the staffers was the principal of the school. Her name was Dawn. She had 2 daughters. Her husband had proposed to her 5 times before she finally said yes, and they'd been married for 10 years. They had a vacation house on the lake. She liked to get down on her knees and to paint with the littlest kids in her school. The other staffer was a school psychologist named Mary. She had 2 daughters. She was a football fan. She'd been married for more than 30 years. She and her husband had a cabin on the lake. She loved to go to the theater. She was due to retire in 1 year. She liked to get down on her knees to work in her garden. Dawn, the principal, told the teachers and staffers to lock the door behind them, and the teachers and staffers did so after Dawn and Mary ran out into the hall. You and I have been in that hallway. We spent 7 years of our childhood in that hallway. It's friendly and echoing, and when someone opens the doors at the end, a wind comes and flutters all the bright, colorful paintings and posters on the walls. Dawn and Mary jumped or leapt or lunged toward the sound of the bullets. Every fiber in their bodies descended from millions of years of bodies that had leapt away from danger. Their bodies must have wanted to dive under the table. That's what they'd been trained to do. That's how you live to see another day. That's how you stay alive, to paint with the littlest kids and work in the garden and hug your daughters and drive off laughing to your cabin on the lake. But they leapt for the door, and Dawn said, "Lock the door after us." And they lunged right at the boy with the rifle. The next time someone says the word hero to you, you say this: there once were 2 women. One was named Dawn, the other was Mary. They both had 2 daughters. They both loved to kneel down to care for small beings. They leapt from their chairs and ran right at the boy with the rifle. And if we ever forget their names, if we ever forget the wind in that hallway, if we forget what they did, if we forget that there is something in us beyond sense and reason, something that snarls at death and runs roaring at it to defend children, if we ever forget that all children are our children, then we are fools who have allowed memory to be murdered too. And what good are we then? What good are we then? Tomorrow is September 11th, 9/11 in our lexicon. And we'll hear a whole lot about heroes and the importance of remembering who the enemy is and being strong and making our country great and safe, and that's all well and good. But I'd like to take a moment this morning to remember that I firmly believe that we all have the capacity to remember and act upon this basic truth of who we truly are, that there is something in us beyond sense and reason, something that snarls at death and runs roaring at it to defend children, knowing that all children are our children. In short, there is something of the hero in each and every one of us. And I'd like to invite you to breathe into that with me. To remember that heroes aren't something just that's projected on the TV about somebody who did something great far away. But heroes are those who dare look at death in its face with all its many faces. And death wears many ugly faces that are easy to hide from. But we're called to turn again and again into the face of death and remember that there is something else beyond sense, beyond logic, that is large and is brave and wants to live for the future, not of just our children, but all children and our children's children. There is something in us, in our species, that marched out over that first hill in that first valley in Eden, how many tens of hundreds, thousands of years ago, and looked out over to horizon something bigger and something larger. We have a legacy of being heroes in ways large and small. And I just want to remember that with you this morning. And to know that somewhere in each one of us, we know that the future of one of us is the future of all of us. The suffering of one of us is the suffering of all of us. That the pain that's done into one child is the pain that all children feel and that our future will feel. We have the capacity to be heroes and sheroes, each in our own way. To rise above the limitations of sense and reason and fear of death. And yes, there is the brave man who jumped off the subway platform in New York City to snatch up the child who had actually got pushed onto the rail, risked his own life to push them both under the train that was roaring over his head at 50 miles an hour. What a great, brave hero over there in New York. Absolutely. What about the 80 strangers who joined in that human chain on the beach in Florida to save the people that were in danger out behind the surf line? Yay, that's a wonderful story. It happened in Florida. Great. And all the heroes, the first responders who responded on 9/11, but also in the face of Hurricane Harvey and now Hurricane Irma. Those are wonderful stories, but the story of you being willing to stand up to hatred in your office place when someone says an off-color joke, you in your bravery in being willing to speak your truth when you hear someone being belittled in front of you, your bravery in just being who you are. When confronted with that incessant societal pressure to be more, skinnier, brighter, richer, smarter, but instead being brave, just willing to show up as you are and speak your truth, not someday when you get the promotion or look better or dress better or have more money, but now speaking your truth. Or how about this one? How about the bravery of being willing to sit in meditation for 20 minutes and hear all those voices in your head chattering incessantly, and you still sitting there in that chair, facing into the silence and into the mystery for a few more minutes. When it feels like your back's going to break if you don't get out of the chair right now, but you know it's only been 12 minutes. And you set your timer for 20. How about the bravery of just sitting in the stillness a while longer in the morning in your living room? Is that any less brave than the person who needs to jump onto a railway in the subway station on the face of a train coming 50 miles an hour, or at a man shooting a rifle at a bunch of little kids? Yes and no. Of course, they're not equivalent. Or are they? Bravery is bravery. Being a hero, being willing to face into the limitations inside and around you, to hear what the lawyer and the judge has to say and say, yes, but I know this to be true. To hear what the doctor has to say about the prognosis of your illness and say, yes, I understand that, but I also know that I'm bigger than any prognosis or diagnosis. To have the bravery to get down on your knees in front of your 3-year-old and admit that you were wrong in what you did when you spanked her or yelled at her. Just to have the bravery to say, I'm sorry. I don't know how to be a parent, but I'm doing my best. That's a hero. That's the heroism we're called to. That's action. That's just not some ancient scripture written into a book thousands of years ago, but the scripture written in your heart and my heart. That's all too easy to ignore and to do the safe thing, to duck under the table and just keep a low profile. But again and again, you and I are called to be heroes and sheroes. And that's what we're here to remember this morning. And I also remember the story of Origen, one of the great early theologians of the early Christian church. He was 17 at the time when his father, also a theologian and a priest in the developing Christian church, his father was arrested by the Romans and was taken away to be executed. And Origen, full of the fervor of Christianity and his belief in needing to bear witness, wanted to join his father, wanted to run after him and be martyred too for the cause. And his mother was beside herself. Her husband was already been taken away, and now her only son wanted to go join in and do something silly with the Roman soldiers. So the mother did what mothers do, improvise. She told her son to take a bath so he could be clean for his God as he went to make his sacrifice. So he went to go bathe himself. And while he bathed himself, she took his clothes. And young Origen, who was willing to sacrifice himself to the Romans and to give for the cause of freedom and persecution of his beliefs, wasn't willing to go out naked and be embarrassed and stayed home and lived to see another day. How often do we let our call to heroism get squashed by embarrassment? Fear. It's safer just to duck under the table, not say anything at the office, to let it pass with the kid. But today, now, here, we're invited to be sheroes and heroes in the silence of our hearts. At least, that's my story, but I'm sticking to it.